everyone, and welcome to another IHC webinar. I am Kate, your IHC events host, and I'm so happy to have you all with us here today. Please let us know that you can see us and hear us by popping into the chat. Let me know your name, where you are, and what the weather is. Or you can do a fun fact. We did that yesterday. Feel free to pick and choose. I'm Kate, and I'm here in Southern California where it is just sunny and perfect, as it seems to be every day, which is amazing. Brian, how about you?
I'm in Austin, Texas. We finally recovered from the summer melt, so now we're in our version of a regular summer for the people.
Sounds lovely. Lori, how about you?
Columbus, Ohio. It's beautiful here today. Blue skies, sunny, about 75. So really enjoying the fall weather.
Bryce?
Yeah, here in Denver, Colorado. It's been a very nice summer. At kind of the first day, it's starting to cool off, feel a little bit more like fall. So very
Oh,
excited about that.
lovely, lovely. I lived in Boulder for a little while. My first year of law school, I did at the University of Colorado. And it is truly the only place I've lived where if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes was like really true. We had a snow day and then a 75-degree day like back to back. It was crazy.
That's every February. What makes it fun?
Yeah, there you go. We've got folks from Georgia, Long Island. Somebody else was in Columbus, I saw. San Diego. Welcome to everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us as we talk about leading legal teams in the age of AI. We are ready to discuss it with our fantastic presenters. If you can believe it, this is our 90th event of the year, our 90th In-House Connect event. And I want to know if you're here with us for the first time or if you are a repeat offender. So today we are going to learn about leading legal teams in the age of AI. The session will be presented by Lori Mininger, Brian Lee, and Bryce Wilson. So we have an incredible presentation coming our way. I will stop talking and hand things over to Brian to get us started.
Hey everyone, great to meet you all, and I'm really excited to welcome both Lori and Bryce, who we've been working with over the course of the year, working on this vision of trying to come up with practically how we deploy AI beyond theory into law practice, and also thinking outside the box on how we cover more areas than maybe traditional tools. And we really wanted to have them join us and share their experience in not only implementing, but really their whole thought process of how they approached AI in general and arrived at the conclusion of even when to even start talking to us or exploring options and setting up their team for success. So a little bit about maybe really quickly is we're really one secure platform designed for in-house teams. And we cover three unique areas around research, contract intelligence, and also a legal front door. And then a little bit about myself, former attorney, early days, big law, in-house as well, but also computer engineering undergrad, and eventually wanted to get back my first passions in tech in the last decade. Was launching products at Google and Meta. I worked on the first voice assistant, as well as things like the large language learning models early at Google, as well as AR glasses at Meta. Really, AI last year really to solve this, I think, 360 support that was really needed around in-house counsel teams. Let me pass it over to Lori and Bryce also for a quick intro, and maybe they can tell us a little bit more about what they do at Matic Insurance and also Peak Energy.
Absolutely. My name is Lori. I lead legal and compliance at Matic Insurance Services. Matic is an insurance agency with a digital platform. We partner with heavily regulated financial institutions, so we have a lot of obligations with respect to flow down requirements in our agreements with our partners. We also partner very closely with insurance carriers who set forth those same requirements. I've been at Matic for just about 5 years now, lead a small team. Myself, I'm the only attorney, and then I have two compliance professionals as well that help our function run. They are critical to our success and to Matic's success holistically. I have been practicing law for just about 21 years now, mostly in financial services and insurance, and more recently have spent a lot of time in-house at startup organizations where we operate pretty leanly and have to identify some solutions to be able to scale effectively.
Bryce Wilson, VP of Legal over here at Peak Energy. I've had an interesting trajectory. I'd started at a larger firm doing more public company work, then focusing on the startup, particularly in the venture capital space, where I was introduced to Peak Energy and helped them originally form. And then about a year ago, essentially got brought in-house and now essentially bringing the legal department up from scratch over at Peak Energy. About the company itself, we are principally, I would say, an engineering design company where we are building stationary energy storage systems that get deployed around the country for essentially energy dispatch. Also, a very heavily regulated industry, both from a DOE perspective, but then also in terms of the actual economics. There's a heavy influence on tax policy for like tax credit financing, things of that sort. That is, I'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the presentation, but certainly one way that AI has been a huge value add in that sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's what's interesting about working with both yourselves, Lori and Bryce, is that like you guys are in quickly growing tech companies and you're both in uniquely regulated industries as well. So we sit in a unique spot is really in seeing those parallels and trying to develop a solution and working with you guys on understanding how you guys approach the regulated side of your business. I think in some ways similar, but also uniquely as well. And I guess jumping into the agenda for the day, we want to keep this fairly interactive. So feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go through different topics, and then we'll batch them and try to get to them during the talk. And then what we're really going to explore first is this evolving role of the GC. Certainly, Lori and Bryce have a lot of inputs on that, thinking about the GC from this risk gatekeeper to strategic partner, which we've heard about. But I think today, with a lot of different technology tools and solutions you can do with AI, that really solidifies that shift. We're going to look at first steps with how do you even get started with AI in the tool evaluation process. I think a lot of people start with ChatGPT and how do you even get started from there. I also want to disambiguate a little bit when we get to there about the different types of tools. I think it's easy to think about tools just in the chat aspect, but really AI can be built into other existing tools as well. And then we definitely want to dive deeper into prompt engineering. I think that's a hot topic area. We hear that directly from Laura and Bryce. Will share their own strategies on how they've adopted theory to practice. And then we'll also talk a little bit about proving strategic value to whether it's your peers, your GC, or your CFO or CEO, and really how to drive the max value in this new future. And then we'll also close off with a little bit of talking about how do you balance the innovation side with risk, because inherently, I think as lawyers, we're there primarily to be the best stewards of risk management. So, look, why don't we dive in then to the first topic? Perfect. So I think this idea of the evolving role of the GC is like really interesting and goes, I think we're just in the early stages of where this is going. Because I think I always say to a lot of our folks that we talk to and work with that I think this is an evolving journey over the next decade. And like we certainly are learning a lot of things along the way. So we love that conversation and collaboration where we can go deeply with folks like Lori and Bryce to really figure out where the evolution of the in-house team is going. I think we're seeing the routine work moving to AI. I think that's talked about a lot. I think what we're scratching the surface on is how we possibly reduce outside counsel dependency. We're seeing that in some interactions with using legal research capability tools and bringing that internally, or even asking the more pointed questions before bringing that to outside counsel is what we're seeing. I think Laura also talked about some of the hidden risks that haven't been seen before. And I think something that's been really interesting that we've been hearing from a lot of GCs is also transforming hiring strategies, whether you're hiring more skill-based, using AI in particular, or potentially using, like you're able to hire a different type of skill set because you're using AI to plug in different holes as well. So maybe I'll turn this over to Lori first, maybe to share her perspective on the evolving role of GC and how she's been thinking about it, maybe from when you first heard about it, Laura. I think you were skeptical.
I was skeptical. I wouldn't say, maybe I would say 6 months ago I was a little anti-AI, mostly out of fear, concerned with all of the horror stories that you hear in the industry about hallucinations and attorneys getting in trouble for citing wrong cases. And I thought, gosh, how can this tool replace humans and do this job that we have invested so much time and money into and effort to help our clients and our partners? And I started to pay attention to the external environment in that I was supporting teams internally that wanted to use AI. And there's a whole heck of a lot going on in the external environment from a regulation perspective, and it's piecemeal. And I started my career in privacy, and so it reminds me very early on of the patchwork of privacy laws that we had to ensure that the client was in compliance with. And as I did that, I thought, gosh, how can I really support my business partners if I don't understand and use AI myself? And instead of being fearful or hesitant, I was like, I'm just going to go all in and learn it and figure it out and see how this works. And by using it, I can help better identify risks for my business partners. I had an employee who was offered an incredible position and unfortunately made the decision to leave the team. So we had a team of 4 that went down to a team of 3 as I thought about the next step from a team perspective or what our team should look like. I knew that a couple of the individuals on my team were doing a lot of administrative work. So the individual that left was doing a lot of high value legal analysis, contract work, things like that, really deemed the expert. And then the 2 other individuals on the team were doing a combination of that plus a lot of administrative work. In talking with the team and identifying the body of work that we would want to shift to an individual at a lower level and backfill that senior level position with a lower level position that would do some of this administrative work, enabling them to grow their careers, we decided that we would hire a lower level individual in the US. And then we have a relationship offshore as well. And so we thought maybe some of this administrative work can be shifted to offshore. But as I started to conduct the interview process for the offshore person, I just kept thinking, gosh, this work isn't very engaging. I don't know that I'm going to keep somebody interested or engaged in the team and the business doing this kind of work. So I thought there must be a better way. And in comes AI, the thought of AI. So we really mapped out what work could be shifted to an AI tool or multiple AI tools. We ultimately determined that we would need 2 tools to be able to handle the administrative type work. The first tool we knew would need to essentially summarize key contract terms. We have partners somewhere in the realm of just about 90, and every time the business wanted to do something, take on a new project, new initiative, we would have to go back to each of those agreements, review each of those agreements to determine whether or not there were any prohibitions in the agreements that would prevent us from engaging in a certain manner or would dictate how we engage. And we just started to build these Excel spreadsheets of key terms. And they would, every time we entered into a new agreement, those key terms sheets with, I think I said we counted 111 fields, would need to be updated. That's a lot of administrative work for somebody to read a contract and go in and update all of these Excel sheets. So we knew that was primarily the initiative or the work that we wanted to get done. Secondarily, we wanted to better understand some contract redlining AI. So what could that get us in terms of lift, and what could we really lean on a tool to do? And then third, we wanted that tool to have a legal research function. And initially, we actually thought it was going to be a tool for contract terms and redlining, a tool for legal research, and then additionally, I lead third-party risk management. So we have a lot of diligence that we do for our partners. And so we needed a tool to basically streamline due diligence and RFPs as well. So we thought originally we would need 3 AI tools to help us with these, fill these gaps and complete these functions. And then we started a search, internet search. I did not use ChatGPT at the time because I was still a little bit hesitant on AI. I just did a traditional Google search, got a list of AI vendors, and just started reaching out. Can you tell us what your tool does?
Yeah, and I think I think you were the most extensive searcher of most customers that we talked to because you looked at 11, I believe, pretty deeply and even tried 3. Yeah.
Just for this function as well.
Yeah.
Just for the redlining, legal research, key contract term search. We did another 11 in the due diligence RFP space. We ultimately demoed 3 from those areas. So 6 demos in all, and identified really as the top leader that could really assist us in being able to leverage this tool and gain some efficiency.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. No, I think just for sharing your journeys, like from idea concept, I think it was really interesting. I think the first thing that we always advise folks to do is identify the problem. And I think you guys did that naturally, Lori, is figuring out what exactly we're trying to solve and bucket those different areas of around different types of work. I'm curious, what is your thinking on work that you'll do internally versus work with outside counsel, even, and then that relationship, because you identified legal research as one of those areas. Has your thinking evolved on what that relationship looks like between in-house and outside counsel?
It has evolved. I will give a little bit of background on my perspective on outside counsel. I think as in-house counsel and trying to show value or add value to an organization and not just being a cost center, it was really important to me to be very intentional as to how I use outside counsel. Generally took the position that I want to learn everything. I want to have an understanding of the world that I operate in, and I want to make sure that when I ask outside counsel a question, it's not a general question that's going to rack up 50 hours of billables. It's an intentional question, and it's oftentimes was me conducting the research, preparing the answer, and asking for a review of the answer. This tool has enabled me to even reduce outside counsel spend from that approach, in that I would rely on outside counsel in addition to hiring legal interns in the summer to conduct full jurisdictional review analysis, finding that I was spending money on outside counsel to do that work. Hey, I don't know this body of the law. Can you help me understand what the requirements are across all states? And with the AI tool, I can conduct that research and now even take the same approach there and say, hey, this is the analysis that I've created. Can you just do a check on this? So it's being very intentional about how you utilize outside counsel, but it enables you to reduce spend because it helps you identify or narrow in on pointed questions that you can ask outside counsel versus, again, asking a general question and not getting the answer that you were looking for.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think we found that with some other folks, as we learned as well, is a lot of attorneys will change the fact pattern talking to AI tools. And then another person said to us, like, I'm not turning a $2,000 email into a $20,000 email just because I'm asking follow-up questions or changing the fact pattern or really understanding it. So I think that's super interesting. I guess, Bryce, yeah, I would love to hear, maybe love for you to share your journey as well on how you've been thinking about AI and how you've adopted it in your practice. And also, I think you have a unique perspective on how you're hiring for the future as well, given what a new AI legal team could look like.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting time to have essentially switched over to in-house legal function at Peak. We're a growth stage company. I also have working with their exec team in terms of now working within budgets based on fundraising and everything, particularly since we're pre-revenue. From day one, I always came in knowing that I would be looked at to leverage resources as much as possible. Similar use cases as Lori described in terms of outside counsel management and things of that sort. I was identified. I've been working as outside GC for many startups. I understand the landscape of where time and attention is required and what are the things that I can easily, not necessarily easily automate, but automate to a greater degree. Some of them have been described on the slides, such as issue spot as research, first drafts of contracts, quick legal questions. It's those sorts of things that I used to take as like outside counsel and may take a couple hours to do, where with a simple prompt, particularly for a fast moving business at the stage we are, I can at least get a quick answer back to the other members of my team. I've spent a lot of time trying to identify what are the areas in which I can leverage sort of these tools and not only avoid extra outside counsel spend or extra headcount hires, but there's also like a speed factor to it as well, particularly around research, yeah, contract summaries, as Lori also talked about. These were the sorts of things that I knew I would spend a lot of time on, building out disclosure schedules for fundraising rounds, things of that sort, where now I can just issue a prompt to say, tell me all of my contracts and what are my insurance carrier obligations in terms of what types of coverages I need to have in order to remain in compliance with those agreements. Those were all, I think, very easy examples to identify and utilize. And so certainly as I was then going through the process of demoing different products and trying to find one, it was definitely through the lens of how can I also do it in as centralized of a place as possible. Not only from a we'll probably get into this later too. When you can find a resource that has all of kind of your enterprise information in one place. And so you know that your querying is based on information specific to your company. It just unlocks and make things so much easier. I'll also hit on the other one too. I think outside counsel is a huge aspect of it, particularly in the heavily regulated industry, and particularly one like I'll share an example. The OB3 bill passed over the summer, and the impact on the different sort of energy credits, both on production tax credits and of tax credits. I won't go into the specifics of each of those, but has a huge impact essentially on our industry. And the entire industry across the board essentially has put an enormous amount of headspace into the specific topic of understanding, okay, how did the bill change? What do we do in the interim before Treasury guidance comes out based on prior Treasury interpretations? Where can we expect the chips to fall? And I think one of the biggest additors of the AI tool specifically was the ability to do like quick research, not only for delivering answers quickly to my executive team, but also then pointing the questions towards outside counsel. I think, particularly said on this side of the in-house versus outside counsel dynamic, it's really easy to send an open-ended question and end up with a very long legal memo that takes 2 weeks to prepare, where really like the answer I need is something very specific with respect to one specific thing. Because the other thing that I have to consider a lot more too is in terms of what's our risk tolerance. And certain things, we don't need a perfect answer. Is there an argument that we have here? Do we at least understand what the risk profile looks like so that we can make a decision to move forward? And so being able to educate myself from the research aspect of it, understanding the issue, and then focusing the question to outside counsel to like hone in on that specific point and get an answer as close to a yes, no sort of answer or question as you can. Not always easy to do, but I mean, that's just a huge enabler and has allowed me essentially weave AI into a day-to-day part of my kind of routine and avoids additional headcount spend, iterations with outside counsel on honing in on answers, things of that sort.
Thanks, Bryce. I think that also takes us to maybe the next topic area around first steps with AI tool evaluation. I think one thing I wanted to point out is I think both your use cases touch on, and this has been my observation with in-house legal teams, is that especially growing ones, you're often doing like a Swiss Army knife approach of different things. Like Laura, you said, hey, I thought I needed like three different unique tools, and then we found all that in the Real AI product. I think Bryce, you were doing multiple things from research, also the contract review aspect, or like looking through all your basically your contract living in a Google Drive folder, like when we chatted with you. And I think that's the opportunity is to actually develop the right AI solutions that match this evolving role of the GC, right? Rather than the environment where you have 11 point solutions or something like that. I think one thing I wanted to just call out in how maybe the audience can look at different tools that are out there, just something to remember is definitely that first step is defining what your problems are. But I think there are a lot of tools out there that are, if you think about the chat GPTs, they are chat based. So they're great for that flexible analysis. Or there are other legal tools that might be chat-based only, but they are not great for automation or scale. Like you'll have challenges if most tools will not allow you to put in more than 5 documents. You can't put in, to Lori's point, 111 documents for it to do well and analyze that. And then there's what I call embedded AI and more platform type systems, and that's better for automation and scale and repeatability. And then I think maybe I'll pass it back to Bryce to talk about his journey here comparing with specific tools. 'Cause I think, Bryce, you started with a different AI tool, GCI, and then moved over to us. So just curious if you could share your thought process on that and your journey there.
I wanted to share the results of the poll we just launched, which is what area of your in-house legal work would benefit most from AI, and contract review and redlining won by an absolute landslide. Good to know. And then legal research and citation validation came in second. It's good to know that's how folks are using AI right now, or could use AI right now. And then we had 2 questions. Someone asked they would like to know from each panelist like the list of your favorite AI tools and what you use them for.
One of the benefit, I essentially just use Ruli now because it presents an all-in-one solution for sort of the pain points that I'm trying to solve for. But within other scopes of their organization, for Excel research and stuff, they have a very specific tool that's built off of Claude. I have like personal accounts using like ChatGPT. which is a completely different use case. And also, a huge part of that goes into sort of the security aspect of it as well. There's certain enterprise solutions that I would highly recommend should be used when you're using it for business applications, especially if you're handling confidential information or specific contract sort of things.
Yeah.
And for me, I use primarily for contract redlining, key contract terms analysis, and legal research. I use OneUp for RFP and due diligence. And then I've always been technology focused. So we actually have some other technology tools that have AI systems, but we did not utilize them. Ironclad is one of them. We use Ironclad for CMS, but we did not select Ironclad's contract redlining tool. It was part of the analysis. And I think it's important, as Brian and Bryce both said, what are you trying to solve for? And then understand what's available today. More importantly, the world of AI is evolving, and finding a partner that was engaged and wanted to continue to develop and build out their tools was really important. So the two vendors that we selected was a consideration, was the team that actually sold the product and engagement. So I will tell you from a Ruli standpoint, Brian and team have been amazing. We have a very close relationship. We are able to provide feedback real time and consistently get responses that address the feedback that's provided. So I think since we've had Ruli, Brian, you've probably made 3 or 4 changes just based on our feedback alone.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely.
Before...
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, even on our pre-call, Lori was like, oh, Brian, I have an idea for you. And like they were talking about meeting later.
No, yeah, Lori keeps us busy the best ways, because I think we're working with Lori and Bryce because they're in regulated industries. It really pushes, I think, the limits of what you're doing with your platform. And then it allows us to actually get deeper, which is what we want to do in certain sectors and customer areas. And that's how you really evolve the product, is you can pressure test it and really build it in a pointed area. So we love going deep with partners like this. And then, and I was also going to share my favorite tool on the side I've been using really for our own work is I use Claude personally, because Claude has a really nice ability to generate quick UI designs that I can use to chat with an engineering team or product design team. And that's something that even for yourself, I think it's great to, I like Claude's generator, or maybe there's other tools for that too, but just quick idea generation. I feel like if I could really easily quick up or create like a PowerPoint slide or something, or a visual diagram, I use Claude like that to communicate ideas on the team. So I think that's helpful for anyone trying to communicate ideas, and I encourage people to try that out.
That's great.
Right. I want to add one little piece of information here, because I think it's pertinent to everyone on the call. I think what makes Ruli different is the fact not only that they're engaged, but Brian is an attorney by trade, so he has a legal background. So he understands some of the things that I and Bryce and all of us go through on a day-to-day, and then also can marry that with his experience in technology.
We have a question actually about relevant to a couple of points that you all hit on, which is from Jim. And Jim asked, in the end, how did you get comfortable having essentially all of your business secrets and pain points in the hands of a SaaS provider? Because he's saying it's hard enough to get like regulated organizations to get there with Microsoft or Google, but this kind of tool really seems to multiply the attack surface risk for a business.
I think, Brian, you should probably take that from a tech perspective.
Yeah,
and help,
I'm happy to provide the answer, and maybe Bryce and Lori can add on if their perspective. But again, I think it depends on the SaaS provider. You really have to do your due diligence. Definitely look for things like being SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, which means they're actually audited. A lot of vendors will say they're SOC 2 compliant, but that's type 1, which means that it's like self raising your hand. If you have an information security team, they will know this and they'll help do that auditing. It means that you'll have the right sort of information security controls in there. Obviously, we don't train our AI model on your information as well. And so we use like our foundationally enterprise instance of OpenAI, which we have that indemnity insurance with our enterprise agreement that we'd sign with you as well. And then additionally on top of that, we do a data isolation layer per customer that's unique in our AWS instance. And a lot of that's through my CTO's experience doing machine learning for the last decade at some of the largest tech companies. And so that's the assurances that we give you, but definitely do your homework And when you're looking at different vendors, that we don't see that consistently across all AI SaaS vendors that are out there.
Yes, not all AI systems are created equal. And I think it's being responsible in your usage. So ensuring that you're being smart about what's being uploaded, how it's being uploaded, what's being asked. I still am cautious, even though all of those technology protocols are in place and have essentially rules for how we will utilize the AI tools.
For us too, I mean, it's exactly what Brian had outlined and is part of like our standard vendor qualification process. I mean, at some point, our data to a certain extent is hosted somewhere. We don't have on-site servers and things like that. So it's making sure that the appropriate security checks are in place. And then specifically, this was a point that Brian and I had talked about early on was like the dedicated instance. So knowing that one, our data wasn't being used to either train models and was isolated essentially from other customer information. Those were some of the leading factors. There's certainly a number of different nuances that go into that, but that's at the high level.
And I can also share if you're like a financial institution, like you're one of the big banks, like where you're going to likely go is an on-prem solution, where basically if you adopted a solution like ours, it would be installed on-prem in your local servers, but that's something your IT team would basically handle the more really secure sort of banking environments. I share that as well. So yeah, perfect. Are there any more questions I want to dive into now, or maybe we can move on to the prompt engineering techniques that Lori and Bryce wanted to touch on. Yeah.
I guess to close out from that, because I think there's one important aspect I wanted to
Oh,
share on, and
cool.
then I can leverage it into the prompt engineering. But certainly, it's not just identifying like the problem that you're trying to solve. It's the problem is part of it, but it's also what's the solution that you're trying to get to, which I think is related, but slightly different in that sense. Also, I think you have to have a principled understanding of what AI is there for and what it's capable of. When GPT first dropped, I think a lot of people didn't quite understand exactly what AI was or what it could do. Having a chat function is an important part and is incredibly helpful, but it was not the only thing that I needed. I needed an ability to have contract outputs generated quickly. I needed redlining abilities against playbooks, so I knew what our standard terms were. I needed some sort of like repository management of some sort, not quite a full CLM type system, but what's something that helps me keep tabs on essentially what the universe of agreements are, in addition to the research function. So there's definitely like first an understanding of, okay, what is AI capable of? And then how do you apply that to the problem to get to the solution you're looking for? And I think that segues actually really nicely into the prompt
Yep.
engineering because not only is it helpful to know what AI is capable of, I think one of the things I found to be the biggest kind of force multiplier in getting good results is how you use AI. And the prompt engineering, I think, is underappreciated. Folks have probably heard about it and it's talked about, but I can't emphasize enough how important this is in terms of getting good results. And it's also like you're priming the model to get you to like kind of the format and the context that you're looking for. If I just queried the model to ask, hey, tell me about this section of the OB3 Act and like how does that play into XYZ? That is a really poor prompt and you're going to get poor results out of it. Like that's just the truth. And it's this iterative process, which has been self-taught. A lot of it has been through iteration of like, how does it work best for me? And you're working with the model first on, okay, let's identify what are the sections of the law that I'm focused on. Now that I've identified the sections, I'll ask a little bit more about, okay, how do these ones interplay with each other? Great. Now that I know how they interplay with each other, what are some of the other resources or guidance that's been issued that have an impact on that? Now here's my specific fact pattern of the situation I'm facing. All right, now it's digested that. And now I've essentially put the system in a place that has all the background information focused on what it is, what I really want to know. And then
Yep.
I hit it with the question that's, okay, now that you have the context, you have the law, put those together. And then based on this, what is result X? And then you're going to get a much clearer answer that is more on point. And it takes a little bit more work than AI is not you just hit a few buttons on your keyboard and it's going to give you the magic answer. You got to work with it a little bit, but if you use it in the right way, the quality of your results are going to compound.
Lori, you had a similar experience where you're using it as a thought partner in some of our tools to try and mitigate this, like our magic prompt to help you write that first prompt. It seems like you just close the gap a little bit.
It does. Prompt engineering has been extremely eye-opening for me. And to be able to get better at prompt engineering, I actually don't lean too heavily on magic prompt because I don't want it to tell me what I'm asking. I want to ensure that I'm really driving the conversation. But when I started, this goes back to I had reservations about using AI and what it looks like. And you don't come in and just turn it on. Your output is based on your input. And it became very apparent when I started using it, and I started using it to test it with respect to or in areas where I already had a very strong subject matter expertise and I knew there were nuances. So I wanted to test the tool to see if it would just pick up on the nuances and to learn what prompts would get me to the nuanced answers. And some of the things I learned very early on, I asked it a question and I didn't ask if there were any exemptions. So I asked how it applied. It gave me how the law applied, but it didn't call out that there was an exemption if you were already compliant with, for instance, GLBA. And so I now learned to say, okay, help me understand what the requirements are. Are there any exemptions? And so it's not a singular question, it's a pattern of questions. One of the other spaces was I didn't tell it that I was in the financial services industry. And so when you don't tell it that you're in the financial services industry, it's pulling generally applicable laws across the industry and not specific to financial services. So crafting that prompt and helping it understand who you are and what you're trying to accomplish is imperative. I also learned by essentially asking Ruli the question, but also asking ChatGPT and Gemini the question to see what the responses were and see if there were any discrepancies across the tools. I will tell you, not all tools are created equal. You do get different responses. And then internally, I run this in parallel with my team member and say, hey, have Ruli solve this. And her prompt is very different than my prompt and didn't get the answer that I was looking for. And she was like, oh, I need to get better at prompt engineering, clearly. And so we use that as learning experience. Like we often share, hey, this is the prompt, this was the result. So when you implement the tool, if you're implementing across a legal function, you really need to have good practices with respect to prompt engineering and ensuring that everybody understands that the output is based on the input.
I'd also say,
Yeah.
and Brian, you might be able to speak to what the tech that actually sits behind this is. Some of it's very simple, like when it's think critically about, or after thinking critically about this, re-review it, and then identify 5 follow-up questions that you have
Yes.
for me that would help better inform your analysis. Like there is definitely a certain level at which being comprehensive in the input is important in order to provide the correct context to the model, but also like there's different like cues that you can give the model that will also enhance it just by telling it to think more critically about it. And I don't know if that's specific to certain weights and biases, but at least anecdotally, I've noticed that my outputs are usually of higher quality standard when I do stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point, Bryce. What we try to do really is we're building it sort of 80% there to capture the majority of the use case. So even if you put in a question without much guidance on it, you'll find that our just default answer will be more thing that legally curated. Because I think there's a question about this too, because we have built our own legal database of the US federal and state level laws and regulations in ours. So we're not just using the model only, we have that layer of additional data, as well as we have a web integration for additional global information. So we always curate this data source that's been from the web to our own legal database layer that gives you more pointed answer. I think Lori's feedback actually about the sector that you're saying, or you didn't say it was a financial institution or insurance, or we've actually responded to that to build a company profile view that can be generated now where that context of what your company does, any sort of special regulations, sector, any other notes that we should keep in mind, whether it's ongoing litigation matters, is now also baked in to our assistant. So the assistant always knows what that is. So we're always improving to fine tune it in a way or give you the option to fine tune it. It's more pointed, right, in that direction. And that's But I think you can always add that special sauce, which is where that prompt engineering comes in, where Bryce, you're saying you can then point it in that last mile in a particular direction. And that is like that magic of doing that iterative work with AI that I think separates someone who can really get the most out of AI and someone who's maybe not maximizing their interaction.
I agree with that. That's a really good point, Brian and Bryce. The layering is super important. I'll ask a question and then I'll read the full answer, and then I'll ask a follow-up question and a follow-up question, and then I'll ask it to put together best practices or guidance. And it's really, what I find really effective is that it also addresses tone if you ask it to. So you can tell it, build me a best practices memo for middle management or entry level employees or the executive team, and the tone is completely different and the presentation of the response is completely different. Content's the same, but the presentation is different.
Maybe we should take a couple of these questions that I've seen here. Maybe the first question around from Michelle around how is the business case built from adopting really, I think this is advice for how to sell the cost of software internally to finance, which actually is our next slide. So maybe we can answer that question and go into the next slide as well. And then it says also concerns re ethics of attorney oversight of AI providing legal advice. That's from Michelle. Yeah, and I don't know if Lori, you want to take this or Bryce.
Yeah, either way, I can quickly answer the first question.
Help us sell the cost of software internally to finance. So I think it's like the ROI, because I think in your case, it's a headcount substitution. And then the second question was concerns over ethics of attorney oversight of AI providing legal advice.
Yes, I can answer both of those from my perspective. Selling it to finance was easy for me because I was in a position where I was making a decision to not backfill a six-figure role. So the cost was lower from an AI standpoint, and the work product was greater. So we got a significant amount of output faster, and its accuracy is pretty dead on. In terms of legal guidance from AI, I am not a proponent of viewing this as legal guidance from AI. This is information that is ingested by a general counsel who practices law and then analyzed, and the output is from the attorney, not from AI. This is not a copy paste exercise for me in any instance. It's information to make me be able to provide more accurate guidance more quickly.
My experience is similar on both fronts. One way I like to think about it on the business case side, Lori, this was versus adding headcount, like from a cost perspective, is a significant savings. But the other kind of aspect of it that I had discussed when I was talking with my exec team internally too about how are we going to develop the structure of the legal department is what does this enable on the business side, which I think appeals to finance departments and stuff more. What is the increased velocity at which contracts are going to be reviewed and returned to the sales team? What are the additional strategic projects that we're looking at doing that we'll be able to make decisions on quicker in order to pull those in time? So it's not just like a pure cost decision, but when you start to bring in sort of the value add or the revenue unlock to it, like it makes it a much easier discussion and sell and being able to communicate that value. Plus one, exactly on Lori's answer on the ethics side of it, it's not a tool that's enabled organization wide where now folks can just go query it and start to ask it particularly very pointed legal questions that they don't have the training and background on. This is an internal tool to the legal department that we use to augment my own analysis. And maybe it's idiosyncratic, but like I then go and verify everything too. Like I'm very particular about making sure that ultimately the information that I pass along to the organization has been independently verified by me, but I'm still saving an immense amount of time by getting to the place that I need to be at a much faster rate.
Bryce, this is great. I think this one's actually related to that. We're just curious to hear from Bryce about his process and consideration when you shifted from GCAI to Ruli. And this is from Brett Richmond. He's curious to learn more about what you learned in using the product and how you compare the two products today. It's probably that data grid contracting issue, but contract support. But Bryce, I'll let you expand into your consideration shifting from GCI to Ruli.
Yeah, I'll talk about it with focus on the lens of what really unlocked for me, because we've touched on it too, of finding first understanding what solutions are out there and what do those solutions enable you to do. And at the time, I'm reviewing CLM platforms for the contract management side of things. I'm looking at agentic tools and models for just querying and research. And ultimately, when I had connected with Brian Rouge over at Ruli, similar experience to Lori, there was like very positive lean in from them as well. From like one, the tool essentially had all the things that I was looking for in terms of what can I hit the ground running with to help resolve these bottlenecks that I have internally. And then also the buy-in from the team. Just like Laura, I've had experiences where they've implemented sort of product feedback things that I've said, oh, this is a pressure point. Is this within the product roadmap? And if it wasn't, I think you guys had even incorporated in it. So for a future release that it would be addressed. And so I think that's really important too, because the AI landscape has so many different tools out there and it's constantly changing. I mean, on a day-to-day basis. And so when you can find a team to work with that is responsive to exactly what it is you're trying to solve for, and it's within scope of what the solution offers, that is, from a business standpoint, you couldn't ask for anything better. It's functions more like a partnership. It's an extension of your own team versus just something that's more off the shelf.
Agree.
Awesome. And then maybe I'll have Lori touch on this concept, which she's brought up. Using AI, the sort of hidden benefit is it uncovers hidden risks, which could be enhancing visibility to identify what she's coining as scary as shit. It's discoveries that
It can be.
previously may have just not seen or not aware of them. But yeah, Lori, love for you to give some more color on that
Yeah,
on
it
that
was
revelation.
Yeah, it was just to say that AI has enabled us to identify some gaps in understanding of regulations that apply to the organization. And as a GC in an organization, it's my responsibility to understand what applies. And so this tool has enabled me to, we have all the big ones. We're good on all of the, everybody knows about this regulation, but there are very nuanced, strange state laws that exist. And this tool has helped identify some of those obligations. I would encourage use from that standpoint. So legal research and contract terms analysis, those things. What it also has done is enabled us to get better in terms of compliance. So one of the things that we recently did was we started, when our annual policies and procedures are up for review, to run those through the AI tool and say, are there any enhancements that could be made? Is there anything wrong in this document? And so while we have gained a lot of comfort that we know and they're accurate, we have identified some opportunities to enhance those policies. Another use case that we had was we had an unfortunate incident happen in the organization, and a communication needed to be crafted and by legal, and there needed to be some empathy with respect to how that communication was crafted. And when you're in legal counsel role and you're very objective and you're just head down on what the requirements are, sometimes that is lost. So running the response through a tool and asking it to frame this up with an empathetic tone was helpful. I had done some research, crafted a memo, and I wanted to deliver it to an entry level team. It made those tone changes and made it more understandable for somebody who didn't necessarily have experience from a legal standpoint or in the legal compliance realm. So there's so many use cases that you just aren't aware of or you don't think of when you start using the tool, but then you're like, gosh, why am I sitting here spinning over this? I can just throw this in the AI tool and see what the output is. And then again, it's not just taking the answer for face value. It's really leaning in and understanding how that tool got there. I view it as I hire an entry level counsel person or a legal intern. I'm not going to hand them the keys to the kingdom and say, hey, go ahead and provide legal advice on this without any oversight. I view this the same way. There's oversight here that's necessary.
Yeah, I think we've touched on this. Basically, this pursuit of innovation and legal AI, which I think there's a lot of people really excited about, but also this responsibility to manage risk as a legal professional and for the company as a GC. I think Bryce, what are your thoughts?
Fortunately for me, and tell me if this isn't where the kind of questions directed. I've had buy-in from from an organizational standpoint from day one. It's not just within legal; it's been an unlock across the organization of, hey, we are moving fast and we need to be nimble, and if we're going to spend money, it needs to be spent in the right way. So like when we're doing it, like what is that actually unlocking for us? And so it's always been kind of a constant thing in the back of the mind is how can I continue to leverage AI in responsible ways that continue to solve additional problems that come up. It's been an iterative process from day one. It's data grid. Okay, I need to be able to summarize these contracts and get this out on day one. Perfect. That I can implement right away. Day two, okay, there's a new legal research project that comes up. I can relay to the organization, hey, I can get you an answer on this within an hour or two. It may require some follow-up, but I can give us some kind of initial strategic guidance. And being able to deliver on those sorts of things when the asks come, being able to do it quickly, then essentially naturally leads to a buy-in from the organization to continue going down the road. So then what's next? Okay, let's start implementing redlining solutions and building playbooks and training it on our specific contract preferences. Also unlocking on a broader scale base where now it's like a standardized review for like NDAs that anyone across the organization within their own tools can run to understand what we're on the lookout for. It's also been training sessions that I've hosted across the organization, a lack of understanding or appreciation of what it is that legal does. When you send me a contract
Right.
review, is that just because you're checking a box to send it to me? Like I want folks to have an understanding and appreciation for what it is I'm actually reviewing and why I care. And it's like town hall sessions to talk through either third-party contracts or engineering services or NDAs and like what are the things we're on the lookout for and why do we care about them because of how it shifts the whole risk exposure for the company overall. And it's been like a very positive experience and part of, I think, our just culture overall. So fortunately, the roadblocks haven't been there for me, and it's largely just on the amount of headspace it requires in order to educate across the organization, both on what it is I'm using AI for, and then how is that essentially strengthening the foundation of the organization overall.
Very cool. Maybe it's a good moment for us to, I think we're just we talked a bit about the AI in general, and there's been some plugs on how Ruli is used. And we have some questions around it as well. So maybe we can we have a short, like a 30-second, 1 minute video that we can play just to give people a highlight of what we do as well. And we're also excited to give out an Amazon gift card for anyone who'd like to book a demo and learn more. So maybe we'll just play that really quickly. We can answer any additional questions after this as well that we've missed in the chat. So the first question around assistant and legal research, we've got some questions on, and Lori's highlighted her use cases here as well as Bryce. And so here, just give you an example of us giving you this sort of output with built-in citations. We have the US level, federal and state database additionally. And then for everything global, we do have a curated web integration. So we go to more like EDU government sites. So we can pull the public directly there as well and what's in our LLM model. And we've had people use it for research in Europe and Australia as well and having great success. And then our other tool, Data Grid, on the platform, really is our contract intelligence tool. This is where I think folks have switched over from the GSide product because they're largely chat-based for research. You can put in 10,000 agreements or more and get those answers pulled out of your entire contracts folder, whether it's Google Drive, SharePoint, et cetera. We have that built in, and you can see exact clause extraction or answers that you want pulled out into an Excel sheet. And our last area is in Word, where we can do automatic playbook redlining. And we have innovative roadmap plans to integrate insights from your contracts library into the Word extension. In addition to giving you redline suggestions over your playbook, it will also tell you how many times have I agreed to this clause, et cetera, which is, I think, the holy grail to make life easier. Where I wish I had that when I was a commercial attorney over a decade ago, but hopefully it's finally happening. So happy to pause here and see if there's any other questions from the group that we missed. Oh, we got one more. Yeah, one more poll there. Oh, and we wanted to share that. Yeah, that's right. If you want to learn more about what you saw here from us, we'd love to give you a $25 Amazon gift card. You just need to schedule your demo by this Friday or any time to see the demo by the end of October. Perfect. Are there any final questions that we should address, Kate? I don't know if you saw any.
Somebody did ask about thoughts on whether the use of AI breaks attorney-client privilege. Did you all address
Oh,
that?
yeah, that's a good one. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
No.
Okay.
If I were to say,
I don't
part of it,
either.
I think, goes into it's attorney work product, is how I view it. So it's not so much disclosure to a third party. It's part of one of the utilities that I use, just like any other sort of like legal tool platform. That's probably all I have to say on it without researching the topic further.
I guess for me, I can give my perspective. I looked into this at some point because I was curious about it. But I think if you break it down to first principles, AI is not sentient, it is a technology, right? Do I break privilege because I've emailed something in the email system? Think of it that way. If you wrote an email, you sent it. It does similar process of using a technology tool or a database tool. Things are inside maybe your CLM or other tools. Is that breaking privilege because it's in that tool and you're doing a search on it? I think if you think of it that way, it's not, because AI is like a really good search tool. The way you think about it, it could be different if you're training the AI model potentially, then it's not being exposed to third party. But then I think the interesting question is, if we think it's actually going to break privilege, or are you then thinking AI is sentient, it's a person, then it can qualify for the bar admissions and give legal advice independently, then maybe that's that interesting train of thought of, in that case, I guess you would be breaking privilege if it was allowed to practice law on its own and all that. I don't know, Lori, if you have any other thoughts
No,
on
I'm
that side.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a combination of Bryce's response and your response. I have larger concerns about internally breaking privilege than the use of this tool. Yeah, from that perspective, I have the same position.
Great, great
Awesome.
answers. And then we have one more question that's, what about sharing data being a possible violation of third-party confidentiality obligations? And someone else was asking, a bot is a third party.
I almost feel like it's a very similar answer along the lines of what Brian had shared as it relates to privilege. We use a lot of technology tools that process third-party confidentiality or confidential information, but also does go back to also understanding the terms in which you're using your like AI platform. We talked about like, security measures. I don't know if anyone had paid attention to like when DeepSeek was announced earlier this year. If you actually went into their terms and conditions and read them, it said stuff like, okay, your inputs, we own it, we own the output, we can use your data to train data. Like that to me is like a very clear situation where that would be a problem. So it's when you're working with your vendor, and Brian was very helpful in this regard of understanding what are your security measures, we have private instances, how is this information being handled, just like it would be in terms of like your own servers, technologies that you use within the organization. Included within our non-disclosure confidentiality obligations with them, a clause that actually restricted the ability affirmatively to not allow input or use of any data they provided within generative AI systems. And
Really,
so,
we do
yeah,
that.
and so there are specific use cases where it is addressed on a party by party basis.
I think it's important to also understand that we operate in a space that the laws don't evolve as quickly as technology. And
Mm,
so you're essentially accepting risk and coming up with defensible positions, and you do the best you can until you know better, and then you do better. So it's not to say that there won't be some decision that says that this breaks privilege or that a bot is a third party. But right now, I think we just have to do the best we can for what the external environment is.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today and sharing all of your knowledge and your insights. This was really informative. Rouge put the link to the demo in the chat earlier, but I'm going to put it in there again. It's ruli.ai/demo. So go take advantage of this and maybe get that gift card there. And thank you so much again, Bryce, Lori, and Brian. We really appreciate you taking the time. And we hope everybody has a great rest of your day.